Scintillation is the newest linear fusion to hit the game, joining us in this first week of Episode 1, Grandmaster Nightfalls. It is a 3-burst linear fusion of the Strand variety. If you're watching this during the first few days of this video's release, it is currently double loot week in the Nightfall, and the Glassway, which is the GM, is not too bad of a clear. But we're here to talk about this weapon and what perks you should be getting on this thing. I'm not really going to be comparing to other weapons in this video because there was enough to go over on just this one weapon, and I wanted to keep it pretty isolated to just this weapon. In the first column, we have Envious, Assassin, and Rewind rounds as our main options, with Firing Line, Reservoir Burst, and Bait and Switch in the second column as those options. The goal is to find out which combination of things will lead to the best result. And I'm going to tell you up front that the difference between one of the worst and one of the best rolls is not significant enough that I think the average person needs to worry too badly. But let's get into it. A word on cornered and surrounded first, though. Obviously, this looks very appealing as a combination. And much like I suggest on any weapon that can roll with surrounded, you shouldn't take surrounded unless you can actually trigger it and trigger it for a long time. In both of the new encounters in the raid, for example, that is not really that feasible, so I'm going to be ignoring it for Salvation's Edge. I also wouldn't take cornered pretty much at all. I would opt for Envious or Rewind. Also, when it comes to the minor perks, I know there's a lot of differences. Should I go battery, charge time? What weapon mod should I use? Enhanced versus non-enhanced. Here's what I'm going to say. Get a mag perk like enhanced battery if you can. Outside of that, whatever you pick is not going to matter that much. Unless you're an insane gamer trying to optimize and damage max as much as humanly possible, then my advice, don't stress about it too much. Your damage is going to be fine. So let's talk about Envious versus Rewind. I'll be assuming that you are rallying with a reserve swap for the entirety of this video. That's where you put on a chest piece with reserves, and then you rally to the flag, and then you switch your chest piece to whatever you're actually going to be using. Envious Assassin feeds ammo into your weapon as you kill enemies with other weapons, which sounds simple enough. However, this can actually be a multi-stage sequence. We're able to put 21 of our 22 shots into the magazine if we play our cards right. How do you do that? By getting 10 primary or 5 special weapon kills, or a combination of the two, and then taking out your weapon, and then you put it away, and then you get another 10 primary or 5 special weapon kills, and then you take it out again. And if you do that correctly, you're going to have 21 shots to shoot in a row. Note that if you pull out your weapon too early, you will not have hit a full Envious proc, and your recourse in fixing this is little to none other than dying and starting over. Rewind rounds, on the other hand, do not overflow your magazine. It rather replenishes a certain number of shots based on how many shots you hit in the previous magazine. With normal Rewind rounds, you're going to shoot 7 shots, then 3, then 2, for a total of 12 on this weapon, with a non-enhanced Rewind rounds. Enhanced should get you an extra shot for a total of 13. We also have Viced Stinger to include in this equation. I will get to that in a moment. So, pros and cons of both. Pro for Envious. You can get 21 shots in the magazine if you actually know how to do that. Con for Envious. I don't think most people are going to keep a mental count in their head in order to maximize the effect of Envious Assassin. Most people are not counting how many kills they have, and then swapping at the right time, and then swapping back, and then you get more kills, and then you check again. There's also no UI indication of how far along your Envious is procced, so you either keep count or you don't, and you just guess. If you die, you gotta start over, and that's not always feasible. Pro for Rewind rounds. You don't have to do any of that stuff that I just said. You just shoot the gun. Con, eventually you may hit a point where you need to reload. However, let's throw Viced Stinger into the mix. With 7 shots in the mag, a proc of Viced Stinger will restore 2 shots to the magazine with a 10% chance to proc the effect when you shoot. This means that you need to proc Vice Stinger 5 times in order to have a sequence where you don't need to reload at all, and you can shoot all 22 shots in a row. And while this sounds like a very rare occurrence, it's actually not. Even in this example where I'm distracted, I'm getting hit by other enemies, I'm missing some shots, I managed to shoot all 22 of my shots in a row, no reloads, with rewind rounds with Vice Stinger. Now, if you do get unlucky, then sure, you'll hit a point where you need to reload. But the nice thing is at the absolute most, if you get no procs of Vice Stinger or you just don't get enough of them, the most you will ever need to reload this thing, assuming you hit your shots, is 1 time. And in the grand scheme of things, that is not a big hit to your DPS. You'll live if you need to reload 1 time. Note that Vice Stinger does not proc with an overflowed magazine, so it's kind of a non-factor when it comes to Envious Assassin, so don't worry about it for Envious. Now, I did this test with Enhanced Battery and Adept Mag, which gives you 7 shots in the magazine, thinking, apparently like an idiot, that more shots in magazine equal good. After I finished, I learned that Adept Mag reduces your total reserves compared to not using it. With Adept Mag, I can hold 22 shots. Without it, I can hold 25. But even with just a mag perk, no enhanced rewind, and with Vice Stinger, I could still get off all 25 shots in a row, no reloads, maybe 24. Even in this really scuffed clip where I completely whiff a shot, I still get through everything, minus 1 shot, but I think that's because there's literally nothing left to shoot. Don't get it too twisted though, there aren't that many encounters in the game that give damage windows long enough to shoot that many shots in a row anyway. So, overall, I'm absolutely leaning towards rewind rounds for most people. If you're a god tier player who doesn't want to rely on getting Vice procs, sure, go Envious, but I think the general population should be going with rewind rounds. It's just less hassle. That being said, I did end up doing damage calculations for Envious and every other damage perk, firing line, reservoir burst, bait and switch, and here's what I found. I used a made-up damage number for the linear because as long as we scale everything tuned to this made-up number, every other number is going to line up in the long term. Could I have just used actual damage numbers? Yes, but to keep things clear, I simply used 1,000 damage per shot, which makes for 3,000 damage per burst. Then I figured out how long it took to approximately shoot 21 shots in a row, which is about 30 seconds, and then I added everything together. This works for firing line and reservoir burst, but not for Izanagi swapping, which we will talk about. For Izanagi swapping, I simply did a full Izanagi rotation. I timed how long it took, and I multiplied by 3 rotations. An Izanagi rotation took about 13.25 seconds, but as usual, your time may vary slightly, and this was also in a testing environment, no stakes, no outside pressures. As for the damage of the Izanagi shot, I needed to make sure that it scaled the same as my made-up number of 1,000 damage. So in terms of those damage numbers for Izanagi, I want to die. Initially, I tested in the Enclave, and the ratio of the damage numbers between a Honed Edge X4 crit and 1 part of a burst of the linear was 6.3x. So that would mean in my made-up world, where the linear does 1,000 damage per shot, 3,000 per burst, Izanagi would do 6,300 damage. Cool. And then I went to a Law Sector, and it's 7.0. Okay, so now it's doing 7,000 damage. And then I go to the Ogre in Grasp of Avarice, and it's 5.95x. Great, now it's 5,950 damage. I calculate the damage numbers for all 3 environments anyway, and the difference between the lowest and the highest damage values using my numbers was about 3%, which is to say, not that much of a variance in the grand scheme of the game. The highest DPS of the 3 was Izanagi swapping with bait and switch on the linear. Bait and switch lasts 10 seconds, which means you can fire 7 shots before you need to reload. Conveniently, we can hold 7 shots at base with nothing else. Also conveniently, auto-loading holster is on this weapon and will trigger in time while doing Izanagi swaps. So you can either do auto-loading holster or perfect Envious swapping to get the maximum damage. Now, this did not include damage from the third weapon that you would use to trigger bait and switch, as it can vary from being irrelevant if you're using a primary to much more relevant if you are using another special weapon. For now, I am just going to assume that you're using a primary to proc bait and switch, and therefore I did not include that damage in my calculations. Following that was a perfect Envious, that's 21 shots in a row, no misses, and Firing Line. Firing Line is a flat 20% damage bonus as long as you are near other people. But if you don't have enough people near you, it is completely useless. And in comparing to my best example numbers from the Izanagi example, this setup was essentially equal, or at the very least, not different enough to really matter. Finally, we have Reservoir Burst with Perfect Envious. This enables you to get 15 shots at 25% bonus damage, with the remaining 6 shots being at normal damage. If we use the best numbers from my Izanagi testing, this combo was a mere 2% less DPS than Izanagi swapping, and that's mainly due to the lack of reloads and extra swapping, as getting through 3 Izanagi rotations with this setup is about 40 seconds, whereas shooting 21 shots in a row is 30 seconds, much like the previous example. Now we move to rewind rounds. We learned that it is quite possible to get all 22 shots of this fusion fired in a row without reloads. However, we can rule out Reservoir Burst immediately if we're using Rewind, because again, Rewind does not overflow the magazine, it just adds back to it, meaning we're never really going to have Reservoir Burst active pretty much ever outside of like the first shot. Firing Line seems like a very natural choice to pair with rewind rounds. You never need to stop shooting. Firing Line is always active, assuming you're near people. And therefore, this is the best setup for the least amount of effort possible. You don't need to do Envious Assassin management. You don't need to fumble with your weapon swaps. And your damage is going to be within around 8 to 10% of the other things that I've discussed so far, which is fantastic. But rewind rounds and bait and switch can also work well together, even though I think it's kind of against the spirit of rewind rounds, which is just to like keep shooting. The reason it can work is because you don't actually lose your rewind round ammo restoration when you swap weapons. It keeps track. And you're going to need to do that in order to reproc bait and switch every 7 shots, which I poorly simulate in this clip. So if you can shoot all 22 of your shots without needing to reload, even with the swapping, and maybe you're even doing some Izanagi swapping on top of that, then I don't see why you wouldn't opt for rewind and bait and switch. The benefit of bait and switch over Firing Line is that you can use this thing anywhere without having to rely on teammates, right? You don't have to worry about that at all. For the Witness, though, who is in the current raid, Firing Line is very relevant. So, all this being said, which one should you actually get and use? The answer is it depends on your skill level, and it depends on where you're using this thing. If you want the easiest route to damage, Rewind and Firing Line are the play. You point and shoot, you don't have to care about anything else, and you're going to be very competitive against other linear fusions of the same kind. Also keep in mind, there's not a lot of damage phases in the game that last long enough to burn through all that ammo, especially if you're Izanagi swapping. Witness might be one of the longer ones out there. Now, compared to Euphony, which is the raid exotic, I haven't done a ton of testing with it, but I have anecdotal evidence that it does very well on the Witness. But considering that it's a special ammo linear fusion, and I think it is at the very least keeping up with a power ammo linear fusion, that should tell you that it's pretty good, and I don't think you can go wrong with using either one. But Euphony excels in a longer damage phase, so you can keep stacking that damage bonus with all of the threadlings. So, At the end of the day, do you actually need to get a Scintillation? At this very moment, when I release this video, I think it just depends on what you have in your vault. Like, if you missed out on Doom Petitioner last season, or if you just don't even have, like, a good linear fusion at all, then yeah, I would get one. If you got some good stuff already, or if you're like, piss off, Datto, I'm going to keep using Microcosm on the Witness, like, I get it, because that's what I'm doing. But let's not pretend Still Hunt isn't going to get the nerf bat at some point in the future. Bungie probably going to hit us also with the, we've noticed that linear fusions aren't quite up to speed, blah, 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 blah. That talk a few months down the road, and all of a sudden, boom, now this thing's actually really, really good. So while it's double loot for the next few days after I release this video, and while it's dropping from not a Battleground GM, because I know how much y'all hate those, just go get one and toss it in the vault for safekeeping. That would be my suggestion. Thank you very much for watching. I will see you next time.